Welcome to Ask the Expert with noted radio host Steve Sleeper. Each week, Steve interviews entrepreneurs and professionals and shares their intriguing stories of success and service. Now, here's radio veteran Steve Sleeper.
And welcome to another edition of Ask the Expert. Our guest today is John Kennelly with Kennelly & Associates in Oak Park, suburban Chicago. And John is an estate planning and small business attorney. John, how you doing today?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Yeah, good. Hey, tell me a little bit about yourself and your firm.
Well, I formed this firm in 1981, and have always operated as a general practice, doing pretty much jack of all trades kinds of things. And over the years, found that more complex issues were not right for me. So I'm pretty familiar with most areas of the law. I get a complex issue. I've got a whole list of people I've worked with over the years that I can usually refer it out to that can handle it for the client. We represent individuals and small businesses, and as you said, business. We do business law, estate planning, probate. We do commercial and residential real estate. I have an associate who does almost 80% real estate here, and we work with, pretty much all of the courts. I'm admitted to practice before the United States Supreme Court, the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals, which is the federal appellate court that operates in the Illinois, and the Illinois Supreme Court, of course, and the Federal District Court for the Northern District of Illinois. I'm a member of the Federal Trial Bar, and I'm admitted to the Federal Tax Court. So over the years, I've practiced in all of those areas, some less than others. The United States Supreme Court, I've only argued once, and but the experience is in trial and appellate work, and I've done estate planning a lot, which is basically where I've gone to focus. That's probably 45% of my work right now, or 50%.
Well, let's talk a little bit about estate planning. For obvious question: what is estate planning?
Well, it's planning, and it's I talk about the 3 Ds: death, disability, and dissolution. And it's taking a look at your assets, business or cash or investment accounts or property, and figuring out what needs to happen to these assets in the event of my first likelihood is disability, when I can no longer manage them. And so we do planning for that, and we prepare documentation, and we usually set up trusts and powers of attorney to allow for that contingency. And then of course we also work to provide for the contingency of death. Who do we want this to go to? Who do we want to want to be responsible for making that happen? And so we do a lot of planning like that. And then we have to also keep in mind that all relationships don't necessarily last forever. So we have to put exit plans in the unlikely event that the relationships that we have dissolve, or somebody that we want money to be left to no longer can do it. We need to worry about that dissolution.
Now, one of the terms that you used is create a trust. Can you tell me what a trust is?
Well, a trust is really a private contract. It sets up. It doesn't activate usually until your disability or death. So it's an entity that the IRS doesn't require you to file separate tax returns for, except under special circumstances. So you can do that and not worry about the fact that your investment account or your apartment building that has income is held by a trust rather than by you individually. The advantage is that in a trust, you can set up and say, I'm going to be the trust, but I'm not going to be the trust. I'm not going to be the trustee of this if I can't be. And so we set up ways that we can name someone else as the trustee, or we have someone else named. We have ways that under the circumstance, if you're disabled, there are ways that we can establish disability and someone can take over because you weren't planning on disability, so you have to establish that so the other person can take over. Or for death, we have a provision. We have provisions so someone's there to step into your shoes and administer in the event of the death.
Okay, so what is power of attorney?
Well, power of attorney has a lot of similarities to a trust because it names. There are two different kinds. There's a power of attorney for property and one for health care. So vis-a-vis the trust, it's the power of attorney for property. And what that does is, and we call them, generally what we use is a power of attorney that will survive your disability. Some powers of attorney wouldn't. So we write them so they can. We call them durable powers of attorney. And there's a state of Illinois statute that governs a simple power of attorney. And what that says is that I'm naming this person to take over for me in the event that I can't, as long as I'm living but not able to. Now, it can activate on disability, the same terms as I just described in a trust, or it can activate by you doing a writing and saying, this person is going to handle this transaction or these transactions for me in my absence, and it's a limited power of attorney. But basically, they assign power of attorney. They make somebody what's called an attorney in fact, make them your agent for the purpose of acting with respect to a certain asset or a certain transaction.
Okay. Wills. Definition of a will. What happens if I die without a will?
Well, in some situations, it's not the worst thing that can happen. I mean, you're going to have, ordinarily, you're going to end up with a probate estate. And I can explain probate in a second, but the purpose of the will is to, again, it's a contract. Mm-hmm. It actually sets out a roadmap. So, for instance, if we don't have a trust, and very, very simple estates probably don't need one. So we would say in the will, at my death, I want half my estate to go to my wife and the balance to be divided equally among my children. Well, that's the same thing that would happen if you didn't have a will, except that when you have a will, you may be able to accomplish it without going through probate. If you have a trust and you've done it, you will avoid probate altogether. Probate costs some money, but if you have a will, one of the things in a will, and that's really the important element of it for smaller estates, is that it waives bond. You don't have to pay a premium to an insurance company or the executor doesn't, for the privilege of doing what the will tells you to do. So for a simple estate where it's just going to the heirs and it's split between the spouse and the children, we usually do it, and you do it mainly to avoid the need for a bond. Now, you can also say, I'm going to disinherit this child, or I only want my spouse to have less, and that creates issues too, because spouses have, without a trust, a spouse has some options where they can set that aside. But you can change the amount of distribution, or it goes to my spouse. If my spouse doesn't survive me, then I want to divide it among my 3 children, but I only want one of them to get 10% and the other 2 to divide the other 90. You can do all kinds of things like that with a will that you don't do if you don't have one.
Okay, now what's probate?
Well, probate is, if it is just a will and it does have assets, then probate is a court proceeding. And it's you go before a judge. Probate is a fairly ancient practice. So it uses lots of forms. It hasn't changed a whole lot since the 18th or 17th century. But you use forms. You have to, and there's certain papers that have to be filed, and a circuit court judge will review the papers, and then you can act. Now, we do have a big change in Illinois called independent administration. So once the judge reviews the document, the probate documents, you can operate independently of the probate judge until it's time to close, unless some other heir or legatee. A legatee is somebody who takes under a will or under the direction of a will, but is not an heir, and that is, they wouldn't take it automatically.
Okay.
So unless somebody that is in the hierarchy of authority objects, you would operate without any supervision of the court. So we open the estate, we administer it, and then we close it. So it's a fairly simple process, but it requires a series of documents to be signed and filed. But it generally only requires 2 court appearances, some formal notices that have to be sent out to creditors and publication for creditors. Make sure they don't, because we want to not. If you open an estate and file a notice, publish a notice to creditors, and send notices to the creditors you really know about, they only have 6 months to file a claim. After 6 months, they're gone. They can't come back and tell you they want their claim. Then after 6 months, you can make distributions to the heirs. So it's a pretty it's a lot more streamlined than it used to be, but it still has these technical formalities that make it a little bit cumbersome for the novice.
Yeah. Sounds like it. You work a lot with small businesses, and a lot of what you do for small businesses is kind of intertwined with what we've talked about so far. Especially if it's a mom and pop business, and my wife and I are a mom and pop business, so I understand. Right. But let's shift gears a little bit and talk about some of the other things you do for small businesses.
Well, often act as general counsel. Mm-hmm. So the small business owner can call in or email and say, I want to sign this contract. We take a look at it, and I can say, well, do you understand this and that about it? And yeah, we understand the deal. And I say, yeah, okay, you can sign it. It's okay. This is this downside risk if there is any. Or I'll set up a structure for them. They can have a limited liability corporation or a business corporation. They can set it up to be a registered and be registered. It's set up that sets up on the basis for a different kind of tax structure, and it allows them to operate in sort of a different level. Sometimes we want to set up a business and put documentation in it to avoid that probate thing. We don't put it in a trust, but we set it up so we've got built-in transfer of ownership. And basically, people come in that are in small business, they're starting a business, and they say, my business is doing this, and I want to do this. How do I do it?
Yeah.
And we go through one that called me the other day said, I want to start an LLC. And my question is, why? Well, I'm going to start a business. Well, what kind of business is it? Well, by the time I got to about the 5th question, I said, you don't need an LLC. They're more expensive, and people like the term, but you don't need it. You can use a much more streamlined thing called a subchapter S corporation. Get what you want and get the protection you want, but do it more simply. And then I'll prepare that documentation for them. If they've got employees, I might work on their contracts with employees or their non-competes, or I might work on if they want to have customer agreements. We'll look at their customer agreements. Most of the time, small businesses, if they're going to be, people have some experience. A lot of times they'll come in there with somebody else's contracts. So we'll go through those contracts. They're not copyrighted as a rule, so there's really no reason why we can't use them. but we go through them and make some changes to make them comply with what we're doing.
Yeah.
And so we work with contracts for them. Or we might look up, work on some loan documentation that they need to have, that the, bank wants documents that they haven't bothered with, so we have to generate them. And it's mainly work them through whatever process there may be. Or I may be selling a business. I'm selling a business now.
Mm-hmm.
I've got to get. I'm getting their all the paperwork they need from the various government agencies to prove that they're viable business, and do the documentation to sell. Or if they're buying a business, they do a lot of documentation for the offer to buy, but ultimately, review whatever the seller is trying to provide us.
Hey, Jack, what's the most common question you get?
Well, I guess I may have said the common question, I think, is really, I've got this company and I want to do this.
Yeah.
Can you help me do it? Yeah, I can help you do it. And then it's a matter of working through. Sometimes it's simple. Sometimes it just say, just collect $10 and do it. Or we'll talk through the downsides, the upsides, what protections I believe they need, and try to get knowledge. Try to share knowledge. They have to share knowledge with me about what their business is, and then we work through what's needed. A lot of the first thing I'll tell these companies, young business owners, is insurance.
Yeah.
And what kind of insurance do I need? Well, that's an insurance broker, and based on the type of company, the type of service they're providing, the type of product they're producing, I've got a couple of different insurance brokers that specialize in that kind of thing, and I'll refer them out to get the right kind of advice from. Because if you go to the insurance broker on the corner, you may or may not get what you want. You might just get the product they have, which may not be the best thing. It's basically, this is what I want to do. How do I do it? Or can you help me do it?
Yeah, so what you do, and by the way, our guest today, John Kennelly, Kennelly and Associates, Oak Park, my favorite suburb of Chicago. It's about the oldest suburb of Chicago too.
One of the oldest.
Yeah, a very, very beautiful area, and we're talking about estate planning. Anything you need to do to protect your wealth, protect your business if you're a small business person. How do we reach you, Jack?
Oh, I'm on Kennelly and Associates Law.net, or I also have acquired another practice, and we're developing a better website. It's OPRF, Oak Park River Forest, OPRFlaw.com. Go to my website, or you can call my office, 708-848-1111, or a lot of people go through the website because they can't find my email address, or they just send me an email, jack@oprflaw.com.
There you go. And it's no, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Anyway, I just got a client who I've been on Facebook for a while, but I was communicating with them, responding to their questions, and all of a sudden now they're coming in here. They were in out in the East Coast somewhere. They were coming here, and I've been communicating with them for 2 or 3 months, and now they're here, and now some of their questions were answered. Now we're going to meet. They found me on Facebook.
Hey, the power of social media.
Right. I really always thought that was a little silly, but it got a client, so it's sort of fun to work on sometimes. So.
Yeah. Well, that's Facebook. What I found is there's an audience there, and you can reach out to them, and if they got questions, they can reach out back to you. So that's cool, huh?
Yeah. Yeah. Really. Yeah.
And if you forget all this stuff, just Google Kennelly and Associates, Kennelly. Some people pronounce it Kennelly. We were talking. That's the name of my neighbor, Kennelly.
Yeah,
he spells it the same way. So, but it's Kennelly.
Well, I'll have to talk to your neighbor.
Yeah, I know. He's got an Irish up there a little bit. I think.
Yeah.
Hey, Jack, thanks for being our guest today on Ask the Expert.
Yeah, if you want to do Google, it's best to do Kennelly and Associates Oak Park. There's a law firm in upstate New York that I sometimes get by mistake when I'm checking my website. So if you put Oak Park, you'll get here.
That's a good tip.
Very good. It's a pleasure talking to you, Steve.
Thanks for listening to Ask the Expert with Steve Sleeper. Join us next time as entrepreneurs and professionals share their intriguing stories of success and service.